Have you ever promised yourself, tomorrow, I'll wake up early. I'll study for 2 hours. I'm going to stop wasting time on my phone. I'll finally become disciplined. And for a few days, you actually do it. You wake up early. You study. You exercise. You put your phone away. You feel proud. You think, this time I'm serious. But then one day, you feel tired. You tell yourself, just 5 more minutes. 5 minutes becomes 30. You skip one task, then another, and suddenly, the person who was so motivated 3 days ago is gone. You start wondering, what's wrong with me? Why can't I control myself? Why do I keep giving up? But here's the important part. You probably don't have a discipline problem as much as you think you do. You have a self-control system that hasn't been trained properly yet. And once you understand how that system works, you can stop fighting yourself all day. Imagine two versions of the same person. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. Version 1 wakes up and immediately sees their phone. Notifications, messages, videos, social media. Their brain says, just check for a minute. They check. 20 minutes later, they're still scrolling. Version 2 wakes up. Their phone is across the room. They stand up, drink some water, get ready, and begin their first task. Which person has more self-control? You might say the second person, but there's something more interesting happening. The second person didn't necessarily have a stronger willpower. They simply made the right action easier and the distracting action harder. This is one of the biggest secrets of self-control. You shouldn't rely on willpower for everything. If you constantly place yourself in situations where you're tempted to make the wrong choice, eventually you'll get tired of fighting. Self-control becomes easier when your environment supports the behavior you want. So instead of asking, how can I become stronger? Also ask, how can I make the right choice easier? Now let's talk about something almost everyone experiences. You decide to change your life, and you go too big. You say, from tomorrow, I'll wake up at 5 a.m. I'll exercise every day. I'll study 4 hours. I'll never waste time again. I'll eat perfectly. I'll completely change myself. For one day, you feel unstoppable, but your brain suddenly has to deal with a huge amount of change. And after the excitement disappears, the plan becomes difficult to maintain. Then you miss one day, and you think, I failed. This creates an all-or-nothing mindset. You either do everything, or you believe you did nothing. But real discipline doesn't work that way. Imagine learning to lift weights. You wouldn't walk into a gym and immediately try to lift the heaviest weight possible. You would start with something manageable, then gradually increase the difficulty. Your behavior works the same way. Discipline is a skill, and skills improve through repetition. Here's a simple experiment. Instead of saying, I'll study for 2 hours every day, say, I'll study for 10 minutes. Instead of, I'll exercise for an hour, say, I'll exercise for 5 minutes. Instead of, I'll read an entire book, say, I'll read 2 pages. Why? Because starting is often harder than continuing. Your brain sees a huge task and immediately thinks, this is going to be exhausting, so you avoid it. But when the task looks small, there's less resistance, and something interesting happens. You start, then maybe 10 minutes becomes 20, 5 minutes becomes 15, 2 pages becomes 10. But even if you stop after the small goal, you still kept your promise. And that's important, because every time you keep a promise to yourself, you build evidence that you can trust yourself. Let's say you decide to study every day. Your goal might be, get good grades. That's useful, but there's another goal hiding underneath it. You're trying to become someone who says, when I decide to do something, I follow through. That's an identity. An identity is powerful. If you repeatedly tell yourself, I'm lazy, I'm inconsistent, I always quit, your brain starts treating those statements like descriptions of who you are. But imagine replacing them with, I am learning to be consistent. I keep small promises to myself. I don't need to be perfect. I can start again. Notice the difference. You're not pretending you're already perfect. You're describing the person you're becoming. One of the biggest mistakes people make is waiting to feel motivated. They think, when I feel motivated, I'll study. When I feel inspired, I'll exercise. When I feel ready, I'll start. But motivation is unreliable. Some mornings you'll have it. Some mornings you won't. If your behavior depends completely on your mood, your behavior will change with your mood. Instead, create a simple rule. For example, at 6 p.m., I study for 10 minutes. Not, I'll study when I feel like it. The first statement creates a decision. The second creates an argument. And your brain is very good at arguments. Maybe later. I'm tired. Tomorrow will be better. Just one more video. A simple routine removes some of those negotiations. Now let's talk about your environment. Imagine you are trying to study. Your phone is sitting directly beside you. Every few minutes, it lights up. Even if you don't pick it up, part of your attention notices it. Now imagine putting the phone in another room. Suddenly, the decision becomes different. You have to physically get up to check it. That tiny amount of friction matters. This is called changing the cost of an action. You don't need to make distractions impossible. Just make them slightly harder. And make good behaviors slightly easier. Want to read? Keep your book where you can see it. Want to study? Prepare your desk before you begin. Want to exercise? Keep what you need ready. Want to sleep on time? Start your bedtime routine earlier. Your environment is constantly giving your brain suggestions. So design those suggestions carefully. There's another reason people lose discipline. It's not because they make one mistake. It's because they turn one mistake into an identity. Imagine you plan to study, but you didn't. You say, I'm so lazy. Then the next day you don't study either. Now you think, well, I've already messed up. And you stop trying. This is the dangerous part. The missed day wasn't the real problem. The story you told yourself afterward was. One bad day doesn't erase your progress. One missed workout doesn't make you undisciplined. One distracted evening doesn't mean you've failed. The rule should be simple. Never turn one mistake into a pattern. Miss once. Return. Get distracted. Return. Lose motivation. Return. The ability to return is one of the most important parts of self-control. There's something people often forget. You are not a machine. If you're exhausted, stressed, or overwhelmed, self-control can become harder. That's why discipline isn't about constantly pushing yourself harder. It's also about knowing when to recover. Sleep properly. Take reasonable breaks. Eat regularly. Move your body. Spend time away from screens. Give your brain moments of quiet. Recovery isn't the opposite of discipline. Recovery helps discipline last. Think about a runner. They don't run at maximum speed every second of the day. They train. They recover. Then they train again. Your mind needs the same approach. Here's a technique you can use whenever you really don't want to start. Tell yourself, I only have to do this for 10 minutes. That's it. 10 minutes. You don't need to finish everything. You don't need to feel motivated. You don't need to enjoy it. You just need to begin. Set a timer. Put your phone away. Start. When the timer ends, you can decide whether to continue. Sometimes you'll continue. Sometimes you won't. And that's okay. Because the important part is that you train the behavior. When I don't feel like doing something important, I can still begin. That's self-control. Some people think discipline means making life miserable. No fun. No breaks. No mistakes. Work constantly. Wake up extremely early. Push harder every day. But that's not sustainable. Real discipline isn't about punishing yourself. It's about giving your future self a better chance. When you study today, you're helping tomorrow's version of you. When you put your phone away, you're protecting your attention. When you prepare your work in advance, you're making tomorrow easier. When you go to bed on time, you're helping yourself wake up with more energy. Discipline is not, I hate myself, so I must work harder. It's, I care about my future enough to do what matters today. Let's put everything together. Self-control often follows a simple loop. Cue. Something triggers a behavior. Maybe you're bored. Maybe you're stressed. Maybe you see your phone. Then comes the urge. Your brain wants the easy reward. Then comes the choice. You either follow the urge or pause. And finally comes the result. Every time you pause and choose intentionally, you're practicing. You don't need to win every single time. You need to practice making better choices repeatedly. That's how the skill grows. Maybe you've spent years thinking you need more motivation. Maybe you've called yourself lazy. Maybe you've started over again and again. But perhaps the problem was never that you were incapable of discipline. Perhaps you were simply trying to change too much, too quickly, while relying on motivation to carry you. You don't need to become a completely different person tomorrow. Start with one promise. Make it small. Keep it. Then make another. And another. Because every time you do what you said you would do, you send yourself a message. I can trust myself. And eventually, discipline stops feeling like something you're forcing yourself to do. It becomes part of who you are. So don't ask yourself, can I stay disciplined forever? That's too big. Ask, what is one thing I can do today that my future self will thank me for? Then do that one thing. Tomorrow, do it again. Because self-control isn't built in one heroic moment. It's built in hundreds of small moments when nobody is watching. And that's the real psychology of discipline. You don't become disciplined by waiting to feel different. You become disciplined by repeatedly acting like the person you want to become. Start small. Start today and keep the promise.